To call the regular meeting for the Village of Tinley Park Plan Commission to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Secretary, please take the roll call.
Engel, Manny,
Here.
Gatto, Aitchison,
Here.
Vic,
Here.
Chairman Gray.
Here. A quorum is present. Staff, are there any communications? Okay. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of the June 6th, 2019 meeting?
I'll make that motion.
Could I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, Commissioner Vic, motion made by him and seconded by Commissioner Manny. All those in favor of approving the June 6th, 2019 minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Item 1, the first item on the agenda this evening is a workshop and public hearing for Bremen Station for site plan special use variation and plat approval for an approximately 60,300 square foot mixed-use building at 6775 South Street. Staff, please make your presentation for the workshop.
Yeah, so this will be a workshop kind of at first. We have two, I believe, two of the commissioners weren't here during the kind of last workshop in October. And then if you guys feel comfortable, we have it set up for the public hearing and we can do the formal public hearing and vote on it
You wanna
afterward.
open it?
There's not for the workshop.
Okay.
Yeah, so it'll just be the workshop now, and then if you guys feel comfortable, you can open up the public hearing at the end. And I'll kind of go through everything. I mean, normally, sometimes we'll expedite this, but it's, again, been 8 months, and we got a couple new commissioners, so I think it's time to kind of rehash everything. But I'll let you know kind of where we were before on specific items, and then kind of where we stand today in regards to those open items. So again, this is site plan approval, final plat approval, a special use, and a variation. So kind of get it all for this one. But this is Bremen Station, and it's an approximately 60,300 square foot, 5-story mixed-use building. It consists of 39 residential apartments, 21 bedroom, 19 two-bedroom apartments, and then around 4,500 square foot of commercial space on the first floor. This project includes vacation of a little over 2,000 square foot of right-of-way that would be vacated and then become part of this project, kind of where you see the corner of the commercial space bump out on the first floor. And this would include covered underground and covered parking on the basement and then the first floor. It also includes some sidewalk and streetscape improvements, as well as an outdoor private patio for the commercial space on the first floor that's anticipated to be or utilized for a restaurant. This type of mixed-use building is kind of in line with what the legacy plan kind of wants to see in this area, as well as some of the transit-oriented development principles, kind of consolidating, having people live near transit stops and in the downtown, as well as kind of having an attractive street wall that gives that urban feel that they're trying to get in the downtown a little bit more. So, again, we previously went through this in October. It's been on hold a little bit as they kind of work through some of the financing and the incentive stuff kind of gets ironed out. But they've moved ahead here and kind of made some of the updates based on the pretty active discussion that happened at the last workshop. So there's quite a bit of discussion there, and I think they've about summed up most of those items that we talked about at that time. So there's still a few open items, but I'll kind of go through each one and then let you know where it stands. As a little bit of background on the site is this was this site was originally the Bremen Cash Store, which was built in 1887. In 2007, the building was approved to be redeveloped. The original building and repurposed as a Boston Blackie's restaurant. During that redevelopment stage, the building was deemed unsafe. It was demolished without the village's approval. Kind of a sore subject going back since it was a pretty historic building. There was going to be a replica building put in there, similar to that one, that never moved forward, kind of with the downturn in 2008. So the current developer, Vin Properties, and led by Vince, who's here today, they got this property in 2012, and they've kind of been working towards, they developed plans first in 2016 and have kind of been working towards this point here to actually get approval on the site. So they kind of initially made plans for a 5-story building. There was some kind of that initial discussion and review in terms of how that met the zoning code and some of the kind of big picture stuff of what we were looking for. They made a number of changes. It again came forward in October of last year, 2018, kind of for that initial discussion, and then we're here today, possibly with the final public hearing approval for you guys before it goes to the village board. So, in terms of what has changed, sorry, one more. What's changed out there since the last hearing is our Public Works Department, and then had bidded out the improvements to kind of move the utilities based on the previous, it was a pretty awkward intersection there. Almost looked like a roundabout, but didn't function that way. Had some dangerous turns and situations that happen with that. So it's always kind of been envisioned that piece of right-of-way would be given to whatever happened on this property to kind of help it develop, give it some extra commercial space. So they have moved the utilities that were underground where that road used to be, and then they've realigned the curb and installed grass in there at the time being. So on the slide is a picture of kind of how it sits today out there. So it's kind of a pad ready for development now. So even some of that utility work and the road realignments already happened. Going back to the original building, when it was demolished, the village did save some of the kind of original oak columns that were placed in there that go back to the original development of that building. So the village still has those. They kind of like to see them reused with the current development to bring something back, just with the history of that old building. So we do have them. The petitioners kind of talked about waiting till they have a tenant in mind to see how they can utilize them inside the tenant space. Staff's kind of just got a recommendation to use them within maybe the lobby area of the apartments where it wouldn't be tenant-based. So, when the next tenant comes in, they don't rip them out and not know they're historic or anything, and somewhere where they'll actually be used. So that was our first open item on the last one, and still kind of open to this point. I think they haven't quite committed because they didn't know about the tenant space, but we'd like to see them utilized in some way if they could in the apartment entrances, the package room, everything that they have on the first floor there. Here is kind of that original depiction, just to give you guys a brief overview of where we started and kind of where we're at now. The 2017 kind of depiction of what they originally came up with here in the drawing. This is the 2018 version that came before the Plan Commission for a workshop. And then I'll get into all the details, but here's what we have today. The biggest kind of visual change you'll see is with the first floor kind of changing in terms of the material, the color, the style there, as well as some of the roof lines. The windows you can kind of see have been increased and changed a little bit to give it a little bit more of a tie into the downtown, kind of balancing a modern design and then kind of a more traditional feel for the downtown, so. The zoning district is downtown core. This is varying building heights, kind of depending on where it's located in that downtown core. Along Oak Park Avenue, it ranges from kind of a 4-story maximum height along Oak Park Avenue, and then 7 stories directly around the train station. So where the Boulevard at Central Station project just to the east of this subject site, where that was developed, and then just to the north of the train station as well, where there's the North Street, the plaza, T-Hands, and a lot of that. So that's all 7 stories, and again, 4 stories kind of along that Oak Park Avenue. This property was kind of tied in, kind of expecting to be redeveloped, kind of with the Citibank property that's to the west of it. That's hasn't really gone anywhere. There's still Citibank there, so this is kind of being redeveloped on its own, but I think that original long-term vision had kind of thought this will probably redevelop with Citibank, which is adjacent to Oak Park Avenue. So it does have that 4-story height, the 4-story maximum height, which is one of the variations we'll get into a little bit later. To the west of this, again, downtown core, Citibank. To the south of this is the Civic District and is the Vote Visual Arts Building run by the Park District. To the west of this is downtown core and the Boulevard Project, and then it's also a little bit south, but also to the east is downtown General, our DG district, and there's an existing kind of office building that's there now that houses an attorney, as well as it's had some tax and insurance agents, kind of just your typical office building that's there as well too. And then to the north is Civic District, and that's our train station and the Metro parking lot, so. In terms of their site plan, they're looking again to build 60,000, just a little over 60,000 square foot mixed-use building. They're kind of maximizing the footprint of the lot, which is the intent of what our legacy code is. In that urban environment, you don't really want large expansion parking lots, and you kind of want to develop that street wall, and most of that is focused, again, around the train station, where they want to see people living, and then also kind of have that urban feel. So they've maximized the lot, the building footprint. Almost 100% of it is building with a walkway to the south of the building, and then a little bit of landscaping to the west of it that they need to do just for some building code, ingress, egress points of this. But they do meet the majority of the setbacks, which again are usually maximum setbacks in our legacy code downtown core district, wanting to make sure people kind of maximize that footprint. So again, 39 apartment units, 21 bedroom, 19 2-bedroom mix there. The second open item we had previously talked about was that one of the 2-bedroom units is 945 square feet. Our zoning code has the maximum square footage of 1,000 square feet for a 2-bedroom apartment. All the 1-bedroom apartments are 800 square feet and meet that minimum for a 1-bedroom. So they had kind of this 945 square foot 2-bedroom unit, and we as staff kind of originally steered them towards if they wanted to do a 2-bedroom unit, we'd be supportive for kind of the 1 unit. It seemed like the plan commission was on board with that too, wanting to see kind of more 2-bedroom units, expecting that to be a kind of a more attractive space for people renting these apartments. So the kind of slightly smaller 2-bedroom unit was looked at as better than a larger 1-bedroom. So that, nothing changed there, but that is one of the variances that'll be going forward. And again, it's a 5-story building, instead of the 4-story maximum requirement. They have stepped that 5th story back, so, they kind of need that, again, to get the mix of everything that they're looking for. The parking spaces that they need, the commercial space along South Street, the number of units to make this, you know, a money-making venture for them, so that way they have enough units to actually get crews out here to maintain it. And then, as well as the amenities that those apartments are looking for. So I can get into some more of those later, but fitness rooms and lounge rooms and outdoor decks and stuff that their clientele is kind of looking for. Again, so building layout has, the basement has parking, kind of bicycle storage. The first floor has got the commercial and restaurant space. They have parking spaces on the first floor as well, including the ADA accessible spaces. And then a 7-foot wide kind of outdoor dining area adjacent, as well as the garbage areas for the residential and the commercial spaces. Then kind of second and third floor, the second floor has an outdoor terrace that's over the restaurant that would be kind of common. You'd have 2 balconies out there, and then the rest of that space will kind of be a common lounge outdoor area. That'll be pretty cool in terms of when we have events downtown. They should have kind of a pretty wide open view from there to the new plaza that's going in on North Street. So space that we think will be cool there. And then 11 apartments, as well as the 3rd floor, which is just 11 apartments. The 3rd and 4th floors, 11 apartments each. 5th floor then has 6 apartments and has the residential amenities I was talking about, the fitness gym, the lounge, and then another roof terrace that's up there kind of facing Oak Park Avenue. So this is just kind of the overview again of that streetscape and site plan, building maximizing most of it, the outdoor dining. Some of the streetscape stuff I can get into, that's not finalized yet. We're trying to coordinate all the projects kind of happening in the downtown at the same time, so not finalized there. So it's some of our open items from just this site plan. Site standpoint is one to discuss variation for the front yard setback, which is for the outdoor dining. So that typically outdoor dining is, and kind of the building setbacks are allowed to jog in and out, so that way they kind of create these outdoor dining environments. But it's not supposed to be any more than 50% of the frontage. With this space, it's pretty tight. It's a really narrow lot, pretty small lot, unlike the Boulevard, which had a much, obviously a lot greater kind of expanse down South Street. So for them to kind of get a usable outdoor patio area here, they're looking at taking up, again, 100% of that frontage. It'll either be the entrance to Bremen Station or the outdoor patio area. So it'll be set back a little bit more. We think it works here. The point of the code and the intent's clear, and the Plan Commission agreed too, that outdoor dining is something we kind of want to see help activate the street out there during events, and I think that'll be a pretty cool space when stuff's going on in our summer. The 4th open item that we had was the variation for the public frontage buffer to be 7 feet. So a width of 7 feet. A buffer is supposed to be a width of 7 feet. There's a small portion along 67th Street you can kind of see in the top left corner of the image that I have on the screen. That's supposed to be landscaped between the street and the sidewalk. Just due again to kind of that unique layout of this site. They could do it, but it would kind of eat into the commercial space that they have planned there. So they're trying to make it work with kind of the tight lot and the tight setup they have, or it would eat into parking or apartments or something else. That setup over there, though, there will be landscaping and kind of streetscape and dining on the other side of 67th when the boulevard's constructed. But this side will have just about 60 feet of it there. They're requesting to be waived. That during the discussion at the Plan Commission, there wasn't too many concerns again about that, but just due to that kind of unique layout of this lot and that kind of being the front, they'd still meet the sidewalk as well as the lighting requirements through there, so it'd just be kind of missing that landscaping. The fifth open item that we had gone through at the workshop was to discuss the variation for the required on-street parking that would typically be required along South Street. Again, this is one of those where this is a pretty not so wide lot. If they put parking in there, again, it would kind of shift the it would have to shift the building or eat into the commercial space on the first floor, and the amount of parking spaces that would go in there are about 2. So, and working it out. There's also a curve to the street there, and it's pretty close to the Oak Park Avenue intersection. So we talked a little bit about that in the workshop, and just kind of agreed that with it being that close to the intersection, with that curve, and kind of with that small width, the small frontage that was here, that this maybe isn't the best location for on-street parking anyways. The guest for this space will still have the large amount of on-street parking, public parking that's proposed adjacent to South Street on both, or to the boulevard on South Street, as well as, I believe, 172nd, or the street that runs behind the boulevard. There'll be on-street parking on both those. And then there's directly adjacent and just to the north of this, again, is the Metro parking lot, which is open to the public after 10 a.m. All the way till 2 a.m., and there's usually parking in there. So we'll have an immediately adjacent and almost always readily available parking for the commercial space. The kind of sixth open item we had talked about was just the streetscape plans in general. These aren't kind of finalized. They just kind of did a depiction of what kind of works out there and kind of what our vision was, but we do have a consultant putting together a plan that'll incorporate the North Street, the plaza we're doing, the boulevard at Central Station, and this project. So kind of any of the development that's going on down there, we'll kind of have a cohesive plan, and then going forward with any redevelopment as well, we'll kind of have that set plan in place. So we put a condition on these approvals again, and the petitioners agreed that they're open to changing the plans once we have that kind of finalized layout for the streetscape. We talked a little bit last time again about the south property line on this property that goes up against between the Bremen Station project and then the Park District's Vote Visual Arts building. So right now there's kind of head-end parking, angled head-end parking there that actually goes over the property line onto the petitioner's property. So they've worked with the Park District. They didn't want to just tear it up and leave it. So they've worked with them to kind of come up with a solution so that way they don't lose all of their parking that was there. From what I hear, it's kind of tight out there with parking when they have events. So they've come in with a solution to kind of stripe some parallel parking spaces, and that'll run adjacent to the sidewalk that's on the south side of Bremen Station. They have worked with the Park District, so that was just kind of one of our keys, is that, yes, this goes on their property, but we wanted them to at least start that discussion and make sure that the plans they have work for the Park District, and that they're on board, so that seems to have happened. And then ensuring that there's some kind of grade difference between that sidewalk that's gonna be at Bremen Station and then from the parking spaces that are gonna be on the Park District property. They've agreed and kind of said there would be at least a 6-inch grade difference there. That'll kind of be finalized and determined with the final engineering plans once we have those, but to at least make sure that you don't have parking and people walking on that same surface. Provide a little bit of a barrier from vehicles. There was the canopy overhang, so they did have on the South Street and the 67th Court side, they had canopies that overhung into the right-of-way, larger than the 5 feet that's permitted, so they've revised the plans just to accomplish that. So they have the canopy that goes over the outdoor dining's more than 5 feet, but it's not going into the right-of-way, so that's fine. So that's coming out the 7 feet that it's there for the dining, but then anything that overhangs the right-of-way is limited to 5 feet, so. We went over the floor plan layouts a little bit right there. We discussed the variation that permits balconies to encroach 5 feet in the rear yard on this parcel. So they'll come up to the property line on the rear side of this property that backs up to the Park District property. The commission didn't really have too many concerns in terms of the Vogt Visual Arts Center is kind of unlikely to be redeveloped unless it was destroyed by a natural disaster. It's a historic property, and with the Park District in charge of it, it's pretty clearly going to be there for a while. There's also no drive aisle access or kind of rear alley requirements through there, so we're relatively comfortable with them allowing that balcony to encroach in the rear yard where it's not typically allowed. There's a variation for, basically floors 2 through 5 have a setback of 44 feet, where again, typically we have that maximum 5-foot setback that is meant to kind of bring properties up towards the street and kind of create that street wall that we're looking for. In this case, they just have the building come out on the first floor, kind of where they're getting the right-of-way parcel and the right-of-way space. They're bringing that first floor out, but then the second through 5th floors again are stepped back. That's just to create kind of the rectangle that's easier for them to work with in terms of putting apartments in there, as well as it kind of keeps a constant setback along South Street, so you won't have. Otherwise, this property would look like it's kind of sticking out in terms of if you were looking at Citibank and then the boulevard at Central Station. And it would actually block views to kind of that vista the curved kind of vista that we created on the boulevard site. So this it still brings it out on the first floor, still brings that active commercial space forward, but then just kind of steps those floors 2 through 5 back. So during the workshop, the Plan Commission actually liked the current design beyond if they filled that space with kind of more building, and it would create some awkward apartments in there that would kind of have some corner walls and the corner that's hard to keep clean. So. The next open item that we had talked about was considering the location of the apartment entrance, the vestibule of the lobby, and at the time it was a leasing office. And kind of looking is there a change that they could do with their plan that would move this to the 67th Court frontage? This is the special use you guys are considering, which the special use basically requires that anything along South Street has to be commercial. It requires it to be commercial and then 50 feet deep. It does allow apartment amenities, but only through a special use request. So the intent's, again, to keep commercial space down there that'll drive traffic to our downtown, provide amenities to the residents that live down there, as well as then help kind of that economic development tax base that we're looking for down there to attract people. This is, their apartment frontage that's along there is only a little over 18 feet, with then the restaurant commercial frontage being a little over 71 feet. So the majority of it's still gonna be commercial and restaurant frontage, with just a very small portion, basically the apartment entrance, and then the stairwell, the kind of entrance lobby area, and then the leasing office has been changed to basically package receiving area. So one of the other open items we had was that basically that office wouldn't meet our building code or the health code with no bathroom in it. They weren't gonna have it staffed regularly or on a daily basis. It would just kind of be somewhere where they stored paperwork, and that when they were leasing it, you know, they could keep kind of their paperwork and stuff in there. So it'll just be package receiving now, which will meet the building codes, and they don't have to add a bathroom then, so. Access to the site, so the parking garage is access off 67th Court. It's got a private overhead door entrance that'll only be used by residents of the apartments. The apartments can be located, again, through that pedestrian access on South Street, as well as a door on the south side of the building that walkway goes to. That's between the Park District Vote Center and this property, and you can get into the stairwell as well as the elevators from so either the garage or from the street. Staff mainly just had concerns about the potential conflict with pedestrians where that garage door is. You have cars leaving, as well as primarily leaving, that wouldn't have great visibility to the sidewalk, as well as residents that, you know, our downtown doesn't have too many of these residents that maybe wouldn't be accustomed to cars driving out onto the sidewalk. So we talked quite a bit about that kind of at the workshop, went over some ideas. The petitioner presented that they were gonna at least have mirrors out there. They've also added windows I can show you on the current elevations that would allow for extra visibility for pedestrians to see into the garage, as well as people leaving the garage to see the sidewalk at a greater capacity. And then we also talked about a potential flashing light that you'd see when the garage door is opening. Everyone kind of agreed, though, that no audible sound was a good idea, since we have residents living in this building as well as around it, that all these other ideas would help kind of that safety aspect, but then no audible sounds. So. Loading and trash, they've worked a little bit on this, again, kind of, they came up with a trash garbage plan that was in your packets. They talked a little bit with the trash companies and with Tinley and Homewood Waste Disposal to figure out what they do. They obviously do this in other towns. Right now, most of our downtown just has roll-out garbage cans that are down there, which, again, the more commercial space you get, that's not really plausible for a restaurant to be rolling out the amount of recyclable and garbage they kind of produce in a day. So they do need dumpsters, and again, the garbage companies deal with this in a lot of other towns, not just Chicago, but kind of surrounding suburbs that have this. So they work with them, kind of design the garbage area, understanding kind of pickup schedules, as well as the type of dumpsters that are going to be in there. The rolling dumpsters are a little bit smaller, so they're able to fit 4 on the commercial side of this in there, and it would just kind of be picked up as they need. It'll kind of be dependent on who that tenant is and what the restaurant is in terms of what their pickup schedule is. The residential garbage area is a little bit smaller, but it's a garbage chute that basically spans the entire building that goes into this garbage chute on the first floor. So again, the garbage company would be rolling the dumpsters out to the truck, and then they'd be rolling them back inside. So there wouldn't be dumpsters on the street. They wouldn't have to roll them out to the curb. It'll be the dumpster company that has a key and access to the building and can get the dumpsters out to their truck and then back into the building, so. The next open item we kind of had was in regards to restaurant and resident loading in general at this building, in terms of where that would happen and safety on the roads, not having them park in an area that's gonna be obstructive to other neighboring lots, or the street in general. So there was a lot of concerns about that at the workshop in terms of the level of busyness and the amount of traffic that kind of goes through this intersection, especially in the mornings and at afternoon, kind of during the rush hour periods. I wanted to make sure there's not garbage pickup at that time, that you don't have drop-off delivery for the restaurant. So the petitioner's been open to that. Some of this will be dependent on the tenant they get, and we'll have to kind of have some more discussions with them. We did add a recommended condition to these approvals that basically requires that the loading and garbage operations kind of happen in a manner that's not going to block the street that runs parallel or adjacent to this site, and that it doesn't block kind of the parking lot of that office building. So most likely it'll be on South Street. It can happen in the parking lot adjacent to South Street, as long as it's legally parked. So we'll have to kind of work that out again a little bit more once they have a tenant identified. But we did add that condition just so when they do get here, we have something to kind of hold them to come up with a plan for their delivery operations. Architecture-wise has probably been the thing that was talked about most at the workshop, and then also, I think, what JC and Vince and JC and his staff have worked on the most, and I think improved the most over time here, for something that, again, looks modern, fits into our current downtown, but still kind of has that more classic look. It's got a lot of different architectural elements involved in it. Everyone's kind of got an opinion about architecture, but it is a little bit of an art form, so I think JC's done a really good job kind of helping this evolve and incorporate everyone's different kind of visions they have, as well as then also, obviously, having a budget attached to it too, though. Making improvements, but making them in the right ways and making sure they matter. So the concerns we kind of had about this was the first floor kind of large expanse of brick that was on the first floor on the east side of this building, as well as just kind of the large amount of brick on the building as well. That almost that entire building was the brown brick. It had a little bit more of a institutional feel to it, as well as then kind of the window locations that weren't really consistent on the building frontage and had a little bit of an awkward look to them. And then just kind of that overall appearance we discussed. So again, this is kind of where we had started in 2017. That kind of drew the eye that, oh, this is a really attractive building. Let's see how we can get this together. Here's what we kind of discussed the last time, again, with the large amount of brick that was on the west and east sides of the building, kind of some of the awkward window sizes and placements, and some of the stylings, again, with the canopies as well as kind of the cornices. The roof on this one, I believe, was shingled as well, so you kind of take the step to the new architecture proposal that they have coming here, and you get the different color, the different style, the different material on the first floor. That's kind of lighter, brightens it up a little bit. As well as the canopies that are then kind of carried down 67th Street. There's a canopy over the entrance, entrance to the garbage and receiving area for the commercial space, as well as over the parking garage. And then as well as over kind of that outdoor dining area that gives it a good look there. I believe they did metal standing seam roofs as well, kind of for those peaks on the 5th floor that also kind of help tie it to, we have that same kind of similar standing metal seam roofs elsewhere in the village, by the other train station, as well as 183rd and Harlem. We have a few shopping centers that have kind of used that. And again, this kind of ties it to that as well, so. Here's a couple more pictures of the designs that they propose now. Get the north elevation that's facing South Street, kind of the primary elevation here. Then the east elevation that's facing 67th Court. You can see again, they've added some extra windows to the commercial space. They've added a more substantial door there. They've added the canopies going down, as well as some breaks then in the wall, just so it doesn't look like a large brick wall, which is kind of what they had going last time. As well as some window. You can see one of the 2 windows they added by the garage door that'll give a little more visibility for pedestrians and for vehicles. Give them a little bit of time, reaction time. Here, this is the west elevation, so this will be facing kind of Citibank and Oak Park Avenue. They do have kind of the large brick expanse here. However, they're proposing landscaping on this elevation that'll primarily buffer that first floor. And again, windows on this side, you got a lot of stairwells, you have the garage, you have the dumpsters, so it's kind of hard to incorporate windows. So this will be one side that will be heavily landscaped, since it will be visible from Oak Park Avenue, at least partially, but it'll be landscaped. And then they have kind of the rest of the building, floors 2 through 5, have the same elements that are incorporated around the rest of the building. And then the south elevation, this faces the Vote building, again with the kind of canopy, the door, the windows they've added down there to at least give it a little bit of a more pedestrian feel and not be so kind of harsh like it was before. This is kind of the neighboring development that I mentioned a few times, the Boulevard at Central Station. It's kind of got a similar look in terms of the tones, but the Boulevard's a little bit more modern. This one will be a little bit more traditional. But they've kind of worked on the styling with this just to kind of make sure it works with that development in terms of the architecture, since they'll be sitting right next to each other. So they kind of have the modern, some of the modern elements, but they'll also differ in some ways, which they're going to have 2 different products, 2 different styles a little bit to make them stand out. The building height, like we talked about before, there was the 5 stories for this building instead of 4 stories. In reality, this building's only going to be about 4 or 5 feet taller than the Boulevard at Central Station, since they have a little bit taller parapet and roof area. The actual maximum height of these 2 buildings won't be very different, even though this one will have a 5th story on it. Kind of during the plan commission discussion, there wasn't too many concerns about this, because again, it not being adjacent to Oak Park Avenue, as well as then needing that 5th story again to accommodate all the things you kind of need for this project to work. The number of units, the amenities, the indoor parking that they're providing for the residents. kind of help this all fit under one roof. They kind of needed that fifth story, so, and they've stepped it back from the very beginning. That was kind of one of the keys we kind of told them if they were going down this route of a fifth story, that, you know, maybe step it back so it's not so domineering. And I think they've done a good job with the architecture, design-wise, to do that. The landscaping side of it, we do still kind of have some concerns. There's not much landscaping, because again, the building footprint's pretty maximized. So there is landscaping on the street frontage, but again, that'll kind of be adjusted based on our streetscape plan. But there is landscaping along that west side that's adjacent to Citibank and Oak Park Avenue and Citibank's parking lot. It will kind of matter because it will be visible, and that is a big wall that's right there. So staff has kind of just proposed, since there's only really 3 species, one of those being arborvitaes, which from, you know, our planning staff perspective aren't the most exciting thing to kind of put in there. They do a job of buffering, but don't involve much more intrigue. So we just kind of want to see that selection of species diversified, maybe some better design elements and groupings that can maybe make that side look a little more visually appealing. It won't be open to anyone back there, but we still want to see it look good, since it will be something that's seen by people from Citibank and on the Citibank property, as well as some of it just visible from the Oak Park Avenue frontage. We've left that open as an open item just for discussion, since we think that would still need to be changed going forward. So, and we've added that as a recommended condition as well, that they, before kind of the final plans, that they'll need to resubmit the landscape plan for our review. They have added some landscaping to the roof. We talked about doing some other type of design element, and I think I can maybe let JC discuss a little bit more. I think they played around with it and tried to get something to work up there. Didn't really end up liking what the result was architecturally, and thought, you know, we'll add some landscaping and trees that we can have kind of grow up there, but they kind of moved past kind of a corner element that we had discussed a little bit at the plan commission meeting. So I can let them kind of talk more about that. We didn't have kind of a strong opinion either way, but we were trying to get, you know, is there something else you can do up there that kind of makes that corner look kind of pop? One of the examples that we pulled up was Downers Grove has Maple and Main, which kind of did a pergola type element at the corner. But again, that's a little more modern building too, so I think that's kind of why that fits in a little bit more there. So again, I can leave it up to JC and Vince to tell you why they decided that they didn't really like that, so. Signage, so we were a little concerned, just wanting to make sure that they have a consistent sign type across this building, as well as you guys too. They had a sign, you know, a kind of sign plan about where the signs could go on the building, but not too many specifics in terms of what type of signs and what kind of lighting it would use. So they've revised that. It's got a little bit more specific language. It requires backlit channel letters or logos. And the wall signs all have to be on on the building. All other aspects of that signage would be, in terms of like the size and the lighting, would all just be determined by the legacy codes requirements. So they do have a sign plan page that at least lays out location, as well as sign type. And we added a recommended condition for these approvals that those sign requirements basically stick with the building going forward, so. Parking wise, they have, the legacy code requirements is 1 covered stall per residential unit, and then there's no parking requirements for kind of first floor commercial. This is, again, those kind of TOD elements that they're trying to bring in. If you require kind of on-street parking, it takes away from that urban feel that we're trying to get here, as well as there's been many years of kind of places being overparked, with too many parking spaces, so, trying to, again, maximize building footprints, and, I think we talked during the plan commission meeting, and I think JC's got quite a bit of knowledge on it too, as well as Vince, and this is kind of their, their bread and butter in terms of who they're marketing this to, and kind of where the market's turned in terms of car ownership is not really required anymore to live. You got the, Uber and Lyft, but you also have, grocery delivery options, and a lot of people either don't have a car, or if you're a couple, maybe you have one car instead of two cars. And this location next to the train station really kind of helps promote that as well too. So, they have with the 39 units they've provided a minimum of 41 spaces, 33 of those being kind of your standard spaces, 6 compact spaces that they've used just to kind of get some extra spaces put in there, as well as just seeing that, there's compact cars out there, so they'll be able to utilize those. And then 2 accessible spaces, which we checked with the kind of state accessibility coordinator. They told us that for an apartment, if these aren't open to the public, it just kind of falls under your typical Fair Housing Act code, where if a resident does request it, the apartment's has to provide it, but they don't have to provide them basically sitting there ahead of time. So we planned for them, so that way we know they meet their parking minimums. If they do have to provide ADA accessible spaces, but they can convert those until someone requests them to be traditional spaces. So they could get up to 43 parking spaces, and then again, if they convert, the typical calculation through the Illinois Accessibility Code would be for 2 ADA spaces. So we kind of use that as our baseline to make sure they meet the parking minimum there. There is the open item for the parking stall width and the compact cars. We talked a little bit about that, and understanding that these will be residents that park in those spaces. We typically don't like seeing compact car spaces in, say, shopping centers, because you kind of have people coming and going that don't go there regularly. So you can get some vehicle damage and people that aren't used to that. These will be tight parking spaces and a tight parking garage, but there'll be people that use those parking spaces regularly, and they usually get a feel to how to navigate them a little better. So we also talked about converting some of these parking spaces to electrical vehicle charging stations, to at least have them with the quick ability, if someone comes in there with an electric car, are there certain spaces designated that have conduit going to them, or something that they need to be ready to set up. They haven't really incorporated that in this plan, but I can let them maybe speak a little more to what their intentions are with that. If they're open to that, we can always kind of make that a condition, and maybe make sure it's incorporated in the building plans. Once they kind of have the electric and the building laid out, they might have a better idea of which spaces are kind of the easiest to do that with. And then we just kind of had an open discussion about parking concerns, and is a parking study really needed for this? The commission noted, I know the chairperson did, that this is really kind of a market choice. They're meeting the minimum code requirements here, actually exceeding them. The petitioner feels confident they can rent these units with that amount of parking spaces, especially, again, with that shift in car ownership. So. Bike parking, so they provide bike parking that would be part of the streetscape plan, so it won't, they provide bike storage in the basement for the residential units. And then they'd have outdoor bike racks for the commercial space that would be on our streetscape, but they would install them. And again, that'll be part of the streetscape plan going forward. How that's incorporated and kind of the style of those bike racks. So. We had looked at the lights. We'll need a final photometric plan submitted with the building plan, but they provided the cut sheets that show the type of lights they'll be using on the streetscape as well as on the building that meet our code requirements. So they'll just have to submit that photometric plan. We have two plats that are approved here. So one plat is a plat of vacation, again, for that 2,157 square foot kind of triangle portion that's out there. That was the whole street and right of way. And then having the plat of subdivision is kind of a plat of consolidation too. It'll bring that vacated right of way, combine it with the existing lot that's out there and make it one lot. So two plats being approved, but all coming to just make this one property. There wasn't too many concerns about that. There are conditions in the approvals, though, that basically all these approvals, site plan variation, special use, and the plats are subject to the board approving kind of a final agreement to sell or transfer rights for that vacated right-of-way portion. So likely all these approvals would go forward to the board at the same time, but we just wanted to tie those in, that what you're voting on here is all kind of subject to that happening. I have the list. I kind of talked about each of the variations as we walked through this. I kind of have the full list up there, but if you guys get to the motions part in the public hearing, I have it better summarized, so it points to the staff report, so you don't have to read each one of these, but we kind of worked through each one of those as I kind of went through that. But that's your full list there. And then just we kind of had four things out of all the open items that we had from the last meeting, which was over 25 at least. We got about 4 left that we still think maybe deserve some discussion between the petitioner or some direction from you guys. That includes the first one being the turn to oak columns from the original Bremen Cash Store. Staff, again, recommending those maybe get used on the interior. They can't be used structurally, but if they're used interior to the apartment lobby. The second one being just kind of clarification on the loading or receiving operations of the restaurant and the residents and how that'll be worked out and managed. Discussing the plantings and the landscape on the west facade, wanting to add some kind of increased diversity of species and then some visual appearance. You could do groupings of 3 or 5, not just a straight line of arborvitaes. And then kind of our last open item again is the vehicle charging stations and how they'll handle that. If they agree to it, it can be handled again with kind of those final plans. So I'm gonna stop talking because I'm out of breath. So I'll leave it up to you guys to kind of discuss here at the workshop, and then if you're open, I think JC and Vince maybe have a little presentation here too, and then if you guys are comfortable, you can decide amongst yourselves if you want to go to the public hearing.
Okay, I will open up the discussion to the commission for the workshop portion of this, and so Vince and JC, if you can just wait to speak during the public hearing portion. For now, it will just be comments from the commission. So I'll start with Commissioner Manny. Do you have any comments or discussion for the workshop portion?
Yeah, for the workshop, just looking at the west elevation, what material is the first story? The west elevation that shows, that.
I believe it's still brick. I think it's a larger size kind of manufactured
Right.
brick, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. Because my question is.
Yeah, so
is
it's
it-
a smooth face, larger brick
Right.
than what's proposed on floors 2 through 5, kind of,
Right.
at a lighter tone.
I guess, I want to know, is there some way like maybe to articulate that pattern for the west elevation just to give that, that massiveness, some texture, just so it wouldn't appear, just a big massive expanse of, of that material. I know you say you're gonna have some landscaping there, but,
You're talking.
Right, that
The west elevation?
right. So I'm just wondering, like, if, that brick could be articulated in a form, like bays, like a window bay, kind of like on the north side, and,
Yeah, I think they had that at one point, and they were doing some cost benefit side of this where we were, trying to get them to dress up in terms of the windows, and we kind of said, if anything, if you're gonna skip anywhere, I guess this would be the side, but that would be up to them too, if they can maybe do some of the kind of, the little bit of sink-ins like they've done on the east elevation there, kind of with the trim up on top, or the cornice that's kind of up there. That's up to them and you guys. I think they kind of took those out to maybe save on some costs, and thought they'd do a little more dress up with landscaping on that side.
I guess, that's my only comment, because, that side's facing Oak Park Avenue, so it's gonna be, very blank,
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Manny. Commissioner Vick?
My only comment goes with that side as well. What is the spacing between the outside of the building and that fence on the Citibank property?
I think it's 5 feet between the wall and then their property line.
And then
So
the
I
property
assume that
line, okay.
Fence is probably right on the property line, so it's about 5 feet in between there.
Okay. Because that spacing alone is gonna dictate what kind of landscaping and stuff and what kind of levels of things can go in there, of course, so, and then accessing it for maintenance of that landscaping. I get, is that, and this elevation here, I'm assuming that's a door coming out of there, an emergency door?
Correct.
Coming out of the stairwell? Okay.
Yeah, it's just a landing, I believe, out there.
Yeah.
For the.
And then leads out to the street,
for
I'm
the
assuming, so.
skate, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, good. Commissioner Aitchison?
So I'm just gonna go down the open items, if that's okay. So in regards to the oak columns, I believe that they should only be reused if it fits the interior design of the building. I don't think it should be forced, and I don't think that they should look out of place just for the sake of using them. I do think in regards to the loading and receiving days and times, that should be specified so that we have the reassurance that it's not going to interfere with any of the downtown events that take place down there.
Yes.
As far as the landscaping, I do believe that there should be more diversity in the landscape plan. So I'm on board with that recommendation. And then for the electrical vehicle charging locations, I think that they should have at least one charging station. I believe that that fits the demographic and the target market that they're going after. If they're going to have those cars, there should be a station there available for them. Those are my big comments.
Excellent comments, Commissioner Aitchison. I too have some comments. I will stick to the open items for now. In terms of open item 1, I do echo Commissioner Aitchison. It'd be nice to see them in the interior, however, don't force fit something that may not occur. I think kudos to the architect. I think you guys have done a great job in revising the plan. So if you guys can make it fit, I believe you'd be able to do that. So, but if it's a force fit, I would let it stand as whatever is natural. Open item 14. I also echo again what Commissioner Aitchison said, and furthermore, I'd say you probably, if one has not been done already, get an idea of the traffic patterns. Now, I realize that whole area is going to change in a couple years with the Boulevard, Harmony Square events that are supposed to go a lot more routinely. And so I think, whatever you do today may not be applicable for tomorrow, but at least it gives you a baseline. In addition, I do like what you guys added in the architect plans, the Bremen Station trash removal strategy. I think if you were able to do something similar, get it in writing or some sort of plan So it's documented on how you're going to do the loading and receiving. But I thought this was very nicely done, and it clarified some of those open items regarding the trash removal. For open item 21, I also concur with Commissioner Vick. It is going to limit the plants you do plant. However, I would just suggest that, and I'm sure you guys have already got this taken care of, but plants that don't die in that extreme winter, we don't want to see just, brown, bare stems and roots and everything else for part of the year. But it is going to be tricky with that maintenance, with that 5-foot access before you get to the Citibank property. And last, open item 24, the electrical vehicle charging stations. I do think there should be some sort of designated, at least I'm not exactly sure what the technology, do you have to put some of the, the guts into the infrastructure, into the wall of the building? If you do, perhaps designate a wall. But I agree with Commissioner Aitchison where, you're going for this future market. So it's probably easier to build it within the facility than to wait for one tenant out of the 39 to say, hey, I just bought a Tesla or whatever electric car. With that said, those are my comments on the open items. And I know it's been addressed in terms of the market you're going to, but I still have a concern about, and I know it's a closed item, about the parking. I know, like, for the structure itself, you have the minimums met and more so. But with workers, customers, and then the changing area there, I think there's gonna be a lot of competition for what we see now as, there's open parking in the train station. But come on Saturday when it's hopping, and you have more people coming there, and to Dan's point, there's going to be Uber and Lyft and some other alternative methods for people to get on site. But I think, unlike the city of Chicago, where, as was mentioned in the paperwork, that people walk to places, Chicago, there's a big disincentive to own your car and park it. Sometimes it's cost prohibitive to do so. And I don't think that's the case with Tinley Park, which I think is actually an advantage for Tinley Park. But with that said, I know you guys have done your homework, you said on that. But I just wanted to voice that I do still have a concern that 2 or 3 years down the line, with a lot of these great activities that are going to be in Tinley Park at Harmony Square, and then the presence of the boulevard, there's going to be a little bit more competition and less open spots. But
And I think, just to comment on that one real quick, I think maybe Kimberly and Paula, that they've been aware of that, so I think they're looking into doing kind of downtown parking study in general, because it's sticking that on any one developer. We know there's something bigger that we have to look at here, and maybe not attaching it to any one development, but at least the village taking a look at what we can do and how that parking all kind of works together, especially with the events, so.
Right. Okay, good. If there are no further questions or discussion, may I have a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
Okay, and second? So, motion made by Commissioner Aitchison and seconded by Commissioner Vick. So, Vince Tessitore and JC, if you don't mind swearing in, if you're gonna talk today, if you could please raise your right hand and state the following. Do you swear, or just answer, do you swear or affirm that the evidence that you are about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, excellent. I have confirmation of the public notices being completed. Staff, do you have anything further to present on this item?
I think I'll leave it up to them to talk. I guess on a couple of your guys' comments, for the landscaping side of it, we have a landscape consultant, so I think we haven't used them to this point because we knew the plan that was there wasn't great, but we can have them work as they come up with these final plans we can ask for their recommendations for kind of those year-round species, things that can be easily maintained through there.
Yeah.
And still give us something that buffers the wall and that side of the building and bring some visual appearance in there. So we'll utilize our landscape consultant to do that. And I think that's it. I'll leave it up to Vince and JC to kind of
Okay.
give their spiel.
And before we get to JC, Commission, do you have any other comments or discussion? Okay, so JC, take
Thank
it
you.
away.
Hi, J.C. Chi, Atlanta, Georgia, with the firm Quo Diedrich Chi. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it for tonight. Thank you, Dan, for the summary of where we are. Incidentally, if you didn't know, we're the same architectural firm that's doing the Boulevard, so we're very familiar with that. I kicked off that project 4 years ago, so I'm very familiar with that project. So my partner, Mark Diedrich, and I collaborate in the office about this project and that one so that we're conscious of what each effort's doing. So that we can create, what we want to be a harmonious streetscape and understand, what each of us have learned from this whole process. So appreciate your time. I won't go through anything in too much detail unless there are any questions. I'll just quickly go through and highlight some items that were brought up as open-ended items to discuss, but also perhaps plug in some gaps of information in case that's useful for you all to understand. This is just, legacy code items that we wanted to emphasize. You're very familiar with it, so I don't need to go through each of those, but we feel we've accomplished each one of these legacy code items. It's been a focus of ours from early design concept moving forward. I presented this basically at our first workshop in October. Nothing really to look at here on the bottom basement subgrade level, other than acknowledging what Dan had mentioned. We not only have the 39 parking spaces, but we have 2 additional that are in the form of ADA accessible spots that we can look at in terms of designation once we have residents on board, and usually even within our apartment complexes, we'll dedicate spaces. So even the compact spaces, we'll number those off and have those dedicated so that a resident's in that space, and if they have a compact car, they can elect to use that will be their space. So Dan was correct in terms of any sort of danger factor. You'll have your space that you're familiar with parking in and out of, whether it's by a column or not. And that's how we would normally handle that. As for the flexibility, that's something that Dan and I talked about even prior to the workshop in October of trying to be strategic about the ADA accessible spaces and maybe using those as wildcard opportunities to have a guest space or have it be dedicated once we've are dealing with the lease side of the apartments, okay? We share the same concern, just generally speaking, that, okay, well, we feel we've satisfied the parking ordinance from the zoning standpoint. Obviously, we're holding ourselves responsible for being able to lease these apartments out based on 1 space per apartment, but we've found that more and more jurisdictions, not only Tinley Park, but they are greatly reducing the amount of parking required. And there's a reason why they are, is because they feel that the momentum is going in that direction. So even though practically speaking, we probably can't name a whole lot of households with more than 1 person that doesn't have more than 1 car, but that's the trend that we're seeing in these urban markets. So we're just adhering to what's out there right now. Highlighted in this one plan right here, our main level, I do want to just reiterate what Dan proposed. This is a combination of some of the improvements we did make. On the exterior shell, we added 2 storefront window bays into the 67th Court side of the restaurant that's clouded in there on the upper left-hand corner of that drawing. So those are glazed storefront windows that were formerly bricked over. So that was an effort to try to articulate some detailing on the exterior as you go around South Street over to 67th Court, and we acknowledge that would be a nice feature within the restaurant. We added those. As far as going to the right of that, where we have the stair going down to the restaurant storage below, we doubled the size of that trash room. So not only are we going to, yes, we will certainly try to come up with hours of operation for the trash removal. As soon as we get to that level of detail of operations, we're happy to share that and establish that as a joint collaborative effort with the village and ourselves. But I've doubled the size of that, so that allows our 4 by 6 foot trash bins to collect there and for it not to be a problem if we have any delays in pickup and other things of that nature. I've doubled the size of the residential trash room as well, that's over on the bottom right-hand corner next to that fire stair from the apartments above. Dan mentioned some windows we added around the exit entrance point of the parking garage. We added a canopy over that portal as well. And to Commissioner Manny's concern, share the same concern about the west facade, about it looking fairly bland on the ground level. As Dan mentioned, we actually did have faux recessed bays along that west wall. However, when we were discussing it with staff, we realized, well, number one, usually you'll have those articulations where you have a pedestrian-oriented circumstance, if there's a walkway or sidewalk, as we do on 67th Court and on South Street, instead of just grass and landscaping. So we felt that it was actually contrived to be able to articulate something like that was merely just for cosmetic reasons and didn't quite make any sense architecturally. So in the efforts of using some sensible economics and being able to afford the storefront windows for the restaurant, being able to afford the other windows that we've added and the canopy over the garage portal, we would prefer to work on the landscape, specifics to the village's satisfaction, and allow that to be what dresses up that west facade on the ground plane. Happy to work with whatever species recommendations that your landscape consultant will come up with, and we'll follow through with that. Just upper level plans there, not much else has changed there to discuss. This was the trash sheet that Commissioner Gray had referred to, and happy to do that. I mean, we're obviously concerned about that ourselves. We have to be responsible for the operation side of it as well, not just the design, so we are taking that into concern. And then just the exterior elevations. We feel that the coloration, originally, I'll be honest with you, originally we have a similar lighter color on the ground plane on the boulevard. So between Mark and I, in our office, we were actually wanting to differentiate the two buildings, which is why we originally came up with just the same color brick on the ground level plane, so that they wouldn't look alike. However, we feel we can keep the difference with the detailing and a little bit more of a traditional look here versus the boulevard. And we felt like it was, in the long run, it was beneficial. The before images are above, the smaller ones, and then the after are below for the same view. And so we do feel that it's just more visual interest just by changing the color. So aesthetically speaking, we decided, okay, let's not worry so much about the boulevard at this point. Let's just make this as attractive of a building as we can. And you can see there on the bottom left-hand image there, the rendering, that is the boulevard in the background. And that's what Dan was referring to. We wanted to intentionally step the building back on the 2nd through 5th floors, the apartments, so that there'd be this really interesting one-story restaurant sticking out there, and the building would peel back to the original roadway, actually, before it closes off. So it's actually kind of harkens that original infrastructure design, and it peels away back so you can see the boulevard beyond. So that was a conscious effort on our part. And then this is the other two images, that the before above and then the after. And again, we acknowledge that coloration difference on the ground plane is more attractive. We did put a canopy over the garage entrance there. And then the west side, you can see we put landscaping in the rendering. We're happy to continue to work on that because we do acknowledge that's a pretty deadly looking facade, even though it's the parking lot and the bank in its way. Elevations. And then we have just some images regarding the amenities. In order for us to be able to rent these apartments out, we definitely need to focus on the amenities, which are helpful to the village as well. Common lobby area, fitness room above, on the 5th floor, as well as lounge area, tenant bike storage, resident storage as well. Those are located in the basement level off parking deck. And then a rooftop elements as well. Happy to field any specific questions about any of this at all, if you have any.
Thank you, J.C. Commissioners, do you have any further comments or discussion? Commissioner Manny?
None for me.
Commissioner Vick?
I have nothing.
Commissioner Aitchison? Okay. I just wanted to ask about that open item 24. Everything you've done, all the adjustments, the tweaks have looked excellent, J.C. Open item 24 in terms of the electrical vehicle
Yep.
charging station, go ahead.
I forgot about that. Yeah, I think, well, normally what we've done is we've done a study on, we have some existing condominium projects that have been moved into. So they've been completed for 5 years. And on average, it costs from $6,000 to $8,000 per space to equip that with that ability for electric power after the building's been built. So retrofitting can be up to $8,000 per space, so it's not inexpensive. So because of that, and because of the demand, regardless of whether it's condominium, for sale product, or apartment rental, we do think it's wise. So what we're looking into is not just one, but maybe 2 charging bays. And we also are looking into, okay, instead of dedicating or having a reserved number of space for a resident, if there are several residents, then it could be worked out between that. So it remains like a wild card space, essentially. We also have thought about whether or not, if we don't use one ADA accessible space for that use, that we could have a charger station there and have that as the guest or flex space outside of the 39 that are dedicated.
Okay.
But we have every intention on, because we feel that would help our rental side as well.
Okay, and I just, out of curiosity, if you do have to retrofit at 6,000, 8,000, just a quick question, how long would it take, and would it shut down, because parking there is already tight inside the building? Would it shut down access to the parking for the tenants?
No, it can be done within, the infrastructure can be done within a day, okay, overnight.
Okay.
And then they can wall mount the unit itself. But what we would typically do is we would actually go ahead and provide the power to it. And so it'd just be like on the design, on the initial construction side. And just to install that, so I'm speaking of, those dollars are actually meant without the infrastructure already designed into it.
Okay.
To actually bring the power in. So we would actually design the locations in as stub-ins for future adaptation, yes.
Okay, that's smart. I like that.
Yeah.
I did like your split screens of what your design was before in October of last year, side-by-side comparison to what you're bringing to the table now. It's very helpful to see the changes, so I appreciate that. Last, I noticed in the staff report, it said people can't have dogs, so I hope the future isn't gonna be dog-free. I'm just a pet lover, but.
No, and that's really because we feel we weren't able to provide green space in most
Right.
of our projects. We have a dog park and everything, so it's nothing against dogs. I love dogs myself. It's more a matter of practical what we're able to offer to the resident. And that's our intention to start with. But as the operator comes on board, perhaps we'll have a size, maximum 30-pound dog or whatever. But we acknowledge these are not large units. We don't have the amenities to be able to have large dogs, and that's really more a matter of trying to control the expectation of the residents, if anything.
No, I agree. Like
Yeah.
you said, practicality rules out in
Yeah.
that case.
The hope with this, everyone's hope is this and the Boulevard move forward at the same time. So the Boulevard has dogs, so if someone's allergic to dogs, they have a building that doesn't have any dogs in it. So it kind of works out that,
There's
you know,
options.
yeah, hoping these both get built, you'll have one that doesn't have dogs because they didn't have the space for it, but some people don't want dogs in their building.
I will add one more thing that was a point that Dan brought out, and it's less about our project, well, a little bit about our project, but probably in general, is on the bottom left-hand rendering here, you'll see that's our entrance for our apartment residence, and it's on South Street. And I completely understand the reason for having commercial as an ordinance, having commercial along South Street because you want to vitalize it. You want it to be pedestrian-friendly, you want to have it welcoming. And so originally, you know, that special use to have the residential lobby there, it kind of scratched my head because in some ways, that's the most active use, is to have the residents coming in and out of there. So it's an inviting function for that. And I think it does vitalize the sidewalk by having it there. So while I understand the spirit of that ordinance, it's also kind of ironic that by putting our entrance there, that's going to vitalize South Street.
Okay, excellent, J.C.
Yep.
With that, if there are no further questions or discussion, may I have a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
I heard Commissioner Vick,
I'll
seconded,
second it.
Commissioner Aitchison. So staff, please go through the standards.
All right, I'm gonna do a little bit of a summary because there's a lot here between the variation, or, the site plan, the legacy, and the special use. I'll go through the variation ones maybe a little more specifically, but, I'll just kinda do a quick summary of the other three requests. So, the site plan standards, the first one's that the proposed use is a permitted use. This is, again, a mixed-use development. It's kind of what the downtown core is looking for. Again, that residential entrance and amenity on the 5th floor requires a special use to be granted, that's been requested with this. The second standard being the proposed arrangement of buildings, off-street parking, access lighting, landscaping, and drainage is compatible with the adjacent land uses. This property's been vacant for 10 years. There's little kind of redevelopment in the area, but this project is kind of consistent with that legacy plan, the vision of that, the transit-oriented development principles we're trying to put in place here next to the train station, kind of in line with the other developments that we've been working on that have come forward in the downtown, and allowing private parking to be constructed as part of the development, internal to the building. And again, the other aspects, the access, lighting, landscaping, all improving this property and then the downtown. The third one is the vehicle ingress and egress from the site, and circulation is safe and efficient. The proposed layout has an internal parking garage that empties onto 67th Court. The adjacent right-of-way is going to be reconstructed with new sidewalks and streetscape improvements that don't exist today, so we'll have kind of a better layout out there. The site plan provides for safe movement of pedestrians within the site. The proposed development kind of maximizes the building footprint, so most of the pedestrian connections are internal, but are all there. And then there'll be new public sidewalks and a private walkway that kind of provide pedestrian access around the property. The fourth standard has to do with kind of the quality of the landscaping. The landscaping plan submitted meets our requirements. We're working on the streetscape master plan, which they've agreed to meet kind of that streetscape master plan and incorporate that in once we get there, as well as kind of increasing the diversity in the design on the west side of the building. So once those are completed, this will meet those landscaping requirements. And then last is the outdoor trash enclosures, which it's pretty typical of like suburban shopping center requirement, but this one will all be internal, kind of like you see in a more urban environment. So there's no outdoor trash enclosures. It'll all be kept inside the building, and they provided the trash plan for that. There's kind of some additional legacy code standards, so if there's ever a special use variance or appeals for anything in the legacy code, it's kind of, you know, making sure that those requests still kind of stick with that, with the vision of what it's trying to accomplish. So it kind of goes through the, you know, does it meet the principles that's presented in the legacy plan? And I think it calls for maximizing the number of people that are within walking distance of the train station, that live within the downtown core, helps create a active kind of urban environment down there. The project also would bring at least 39 new residents, probably more, to the area, as well as approximately 4,500 square foot commercial space, and just an overall aesthetic design that's kind of in conformance with having that walkable downtown in a strong economic center of the town. The second legacy code standard is that the improvements compatible with already developed or planned developments in the district, and basically doesn't hurt surrounding properties. So again, a mixed-use building that's kind of compatible with retail, commercial buildings around it, as well as the developments that are in the works or approved around it as well. All kind of in compliance, again, with that legacy code plan and the principles it provides. The third legacy code standard is that anything meets the architectural standards of the legacy code. So again, this provides a high level of architecture. It's got a mix between the modern style as well as some kind of traditional design standards that exist in the downtown today. The first floor storefront provides kind of varying materials, as well as a outdoor dining area that kind of activates the street there as well. The fourth legacy code standards, the improvement will have the effect of protecting or enhancing economic development of the legacy plan area. So again, the kind of new retail space that's kind of missing in our downtown, that kind of higher end, larger restaurants are looking for, providing that, as well as then more residents that live there, as well as a building that kind of creates the environment that'll help bring guests and help the downtown area and Tinley Park as a whole. Special use standards, the first ones that wouldn't be detrimental to the health, safety, welfare. So again, this is just for the residential kind of entrance, lobby, and amenities on the first floor, along the South Street frontage, so there's not too many concerns there with that standard, or it affecting the nearby properties, which is the second standard, or the third standards that it wouldn't impede any of the development on those surrounding properties. Again, just it's 18 feet of kind of residential, still keeps a strong commercial corridor along South Street, and a strong commercial aspect to this project. The utilities, drainage, everything's provided on the site. There's been, again, we already talked about ingress and egress from the site, vehicular traffic and how that's planned out. All the other requests are part of the same request in terms of the variances and the plat, how it relates to the zoning code. And the special use in terms of how it relates to the economic development of the downtown, adding the commercial uses, residents, and kind of going with the vision that we're trying to get down there. The variance standards start with, that would be that the property in question can't yield a reasonable return if it met the standard of the code. Again, there's various different variations here, but there's kind of some different reasoning for the two of them, or for the different variations. The property is proposed as a transit-oriented development on a relatively dense site. It provides housing density and close proximity to mass transportations. The height, the setback, and on-street parking variances are reasonable to help fill that tight lot in a lot that's kind of hard to develop otherwise, as well as meet some of the other requirements that are difficult in that tight space, including the indoor covered parking requirements. The variations for the unit and the parking stalls are relatively minor and are in line again with transit-oriented developments and the legacy code requirements. So, the second is that the plight of the owner is due to unique circumstances. Again, it's a pretty unique site, a pretty tight site that's been vacant for a number of years and is pretty difficult to develop. So a number of these variances were there to kind of help necessitate what they need to make this a realistic project, and provide the economics there, the number of units, the parking spaces, the commercial space that the village wants along South Street, and making that all kind of fit into that space. The third standards that the variation, if granted, will not alter the essential character of the locality. Again, this project's pretty in line with what we're looking down there. Residential units, commercial spaces. The variances in terms of the height, the setbacks, the parking, the size of the spaces all kind of fit with that kind of TOD model, and don't totally, change everything. So the height's only basically 1 story, helps the transition. The setbacks are relatively minor. The parking spaces are only a few of them. So they're fitting with kind of some of those TOD changes and principles that have been happening in the ways they can to make this project work and fit everything they need in it. Then there's some other additional standards that we have you guys look at as well, but I don't think we've got those, so that's it for the standards.
Okay, thank you, Dan.
Yep.
At this time, I'd like to request a motion from the planning commissioners.
I'd recommend, just as a heads up, I've kind of summarized them a little bit better on your screen, so you won't have to read each individual condition unless you really want to, or every variation for the variation motion. So I've had it just reference the staff report. So I'd recommend reading from the screen.
Okay, so commissioners, if I could get request a motion, or a motion made?
All right. I make a motion to grant the petitioner Vince Tessitore on the behalf of Vin Properties LLC, the owner, site plan approval to construct an approximately 60,300 square foot, 5-story mixed-use development named Bremen Station, consisting of 39 residential apartments, 21 bedroom, 19 2-bedroom, and over 4,500 square feet of retail space on the property located at 6775 South Street in the downtown core zoning district, in accordance with the plan submitted and listed herein and subject to the conditions listed in the June 20th, 2019 staff report.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Commissioner Aitchison. Can I have a roll call?
Manny,
Yes.
Vic,
Yes.
Aitchison,
Yes.
Chairman Gray.
Yes. Okay, we will move on to motion number 2. So I'd like to request a motion from the plan commissioners.
I would like to make a motion to recommend the village board grant a special use permit to the petitioner Vin Tessitore on behalf of VIN Properties LLC owner to permit the residential amenities on the first floor of the building frontage where street level commercial is required for a total length of 8 feet 1 inch. I'm sorry, is that 18?
Yes.
18.
So that was incorrect in, at least in the motion and in the verbiage. On the property located at 6775 South Street in DC Downtown Core Zoning District. In accordance with the plan submitted and listed herein, and adopt findings of fact as proposed by the village staff in the staff report, subject to the conditions listed in the June 20, 2019 staff report.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, motion made by Commissioner Manny, seconded by Commissioner Vick. Can I have a roll call?
Aitchison,
Yes.
Vic,
Yes.
Manny,
Yes.
Chairman Gray.
Yes. Okay, now we'll move on to motion number 3. At this time, I'd like to request a motion from the Plan Commissioners.
I would like to make a motion to recommend that the village board grant the variations 8 as listed in the June 20th, 2019 staff report to the petitioner, Vince Testori, on behalf of Vin Properties LLC owner, at the property located at 6775 South Street in the DC Downtown Core Zoning District, in accordance with the plan submitted and listed herein, and adopt findings of facts as proposed by village staff in the staff report.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, motion made by Commissioner Aitchison, seconded by Commissioner Manny. Can I please have a roll call?
Manny,
Yes.
Aitchison,
Yes.
Vic,
Yes.
Chairman Gray.
Yes. Now, at this time, we'll move to motion number 4. And I request a motion be made from the Planning Commissioners at this time.
Make a motion to recommend that the village board grant approval to the petitioner, Vince Testori, on behalf of Vin Properties LLC, the owner. Final plat approval for a plat of vacation and plat of subdivision consolidation at the property located at 6775 South Street in the Downtown Core Zoning District, in accordance with the plat submitted and listed herein, and adopt findings of fact as proposed by village staff in the staff report, subject to the following conditions. 1, completion of a sale or other transfer of rights to the vacated portion of the right-of-way. 2, the final plat approvals are subject to approval of the final engineering plan by the village engineer.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
I have a motion made by Commissioner Vick and seconded by Commissioner Aitchison. Can I please have a roll call?
Manny,
Yes.
Aitchison,
Yes.
Vic,
Yes.
Chairman Gray.
Yes. That completes the motions for item number 1. Thank you for your time, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Now I will move on.
Those will kind of go forward. I believe they're finalizing the incentive discussions, so it's not going directly to the village board. We'll see kind of how that incentive stuff, when that's coming forward, and this will go forward with it at that time.
Okay,
Just so you-
excellent. Thank you. At this time, I'd like to move on to item 2. The second item on the agenda this evening is a public hearing for a text amendment for lighting standards in multifamily, commercial, and industrial zoning districts. May I have a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
Do I hear a second? Motion made by Commissioner Manny, seconded by Commissioner Vick. I have confirmation of the public notices being completed. Staff, when you're ready, please make your presentation.
All right, so last time I was before you all with pretty much the same proposed text amendment. I had this pretty well drafted, had been done research on this for a while, and essentially what staff is looking to amend is a section in our zoning ordinance under the performance standards that's regulating all commercial, industrial, multifamily development, and just enhancing some of the lighting requirements. you'll see in your report in the back, we have what is the current regulations. Really, it looks just at a foot candle at the property line when adjacent to residential districts. It does have some light sources, but it's kind of antiquated and really dated. There are a lot of new code models out there that help further, not just talk about the light levels, but also gets into aesthetics and other items, that it's helpful to have that codified so that we can use that. Lighting usually becomes a code enforcement issue or a nuisance. We have residents or even just people in the area calling about commercial properties, just the glare sometimes is what is the problem. And so this is really codifying design factors in addition to the minimum foot candles at the property level, which we don't want light to spill over onto other people's property. But in addition, we want to also control those light fixtures. So essentially, we're expanding upon this section. We would encourage and require that all lights to have full cutoff design, be at 90 degrees, so someone can't take a light fixture, kind of pocket so the light can spill out to light more area. That's where you get the glare, that's where you get the nuisance issues. We will no longer allow the continuation of a SAG light bulb. Now, I mean, the technology is here and the costs have gone down, that those type of light bulbs aren't really being used so much, but it's helpful to have that in there. With the LED lights, we're having flat lenses, so none of that light is underneath the fixture and spilling out and causing any of that glare. We also talked about in this proposed ordinance is creating some height limitations for light poles in proximity to residential or commercial uses. Commissioner Gray asked me to look into some of the existing heights of poles, and I don't really have any good documentation without me kind of trying to figure them out. But I did find some information out there, just finding out what is kind of the average, you know, or kind of the ranges it can be. So, I mean, it can be as low as 12 to 20 feet, in some cases high as 35 feet. So I think having some standard of height is helpful for us because there is a range. But again, we also acknowledge in the code there's going to be some non-conforming situations, and we allow a property to replace any light poles that might be non-conforming up to, you know, only 10%, which then they wouldn't have to take a, you know, improve everything. They can remove up to 10% in a year and not trigger the whole property to come into compliance, because we understand there's a cost associated with that. So that was the one comment discussed that you had that I didn't really get a great answer, because I don't really have a lot of good plans to reference light pole heights in this area. Again, I just wanted to preface that we do have exceptions and variations, because there are unique situations where different nighttime visibility is unique. For instance, playing fields, outdoor recreational facilities, they're going to be exempt from some of these standards, but we still hold them to some minimum foot candles when adjoining to residential properties. Again, we're not trying to burden any existing properties, but just to establish criteria on what and when they can repair their lights to come in conformance. So again, a property will have to come into compliance if and when the floor area of any building or structure or parking area or any combination of is increased by 10% or greater. So this would, in the event that there are a building that's getting expanded upon, has some existing lights on the building that aren't in compliance, we can ask those to be brought into conformance. The proposed text amendment breaks down the activity of different areas into a high, medium, and low type of activity. And then we establish some pre-curfew and post-curfew average foot candles, and the pre-curfew average is defined as during business hours. You'll have generally a higher foot candle standard, and then after business hours, a lot of these light fixtures now have the ability to dim and adjust, so we're not lighting up an entirely empty parking lot. But we recognize there are safety concerns, and we have to keep minimal lighting in appropriate areas to ensure that we don't encourage any ill activity because there is no lighting. And we want our police to be able to effectively monitor our community well. But again, it's breaking down these parking lots specifically into high, medium, and low activities. And then we can create a foot candle for that. And again, a lot of this research that I found, I did pull from our Illuminating Engineering Society of North America. They kind of are one of the leading resources to use for looking at lighting, and they're constantly analyzing this. So a lot of this was based off of their research and model ordinances. And specifically, they did adapt a lighting criteria for automobile dealerships. Those are important to us. They have a very unique lighting requirement because they're highlighting their merchandise. So we did not want to negatively affect them. And so we called them out specifically, and we identify areas within the parking lot based on their use and how they can be lit. We have the merchandise area, the area you want to highlight very well. We have a circulation area, and then we have the security lighting area. And so those will have some varying light levels as well. And then we further articulated the residential to residential, non-residential to non-residential, maximum foot candles at property lines, because we really only regulated light levels at property lines when adjacent to residential. We still want to look at making sure spillage isn't happening onto non-residential properties as well. So we established that in this code as well. Again, there are opportunities if anyone is looking to request any variations, they could come through the Plan Commission Village Board and make their case. So we have that ability in here as well. And again, I referenced the non-conforming outdoor lighting and how we look to address that by creating a percentage of we can allow a certain amount of light poles to be removed without triggering an entire parking lot to be replaced. Obviously, we hope that light poles, will be coming in for a permit. They typically do, but sometimes I know these things get changed in a day or two. So again, we have to monitor, and we'll educate the businesses and property owners about this new ordinance and just make sure that they're aware that if they have any non-conforming lights, there is a new threshold. But the new lights that people are replacing, many of them are, like I said, much better than the old lights. So if anyone's replacing something now, they're probably putting something in a lot better anyways. But it's always helpful to have this more articulated in our code to give staff the ability to kind of ensure these best practices are being utilized. And again, this code was also discussed with a lighting design company that does this for a living to get some real feedback. Is this something that is practical and we're not going to be too burdensome, and it seems to be following the typical design standards we're seeing. So if there was any other questions on this, I'd be happy to answer those.
Okay, thank you, Kimberly. At this time, Commission, if you have any comments or discussion, and I'll start at this end with Commissioner Aitchison.
I don't have any, thank you.
Commissioner Vick.
I have none either.
Commissioner Manny.
No comments.
Okay, Kimberly, I do appreciate all the research into the heights. It seems like the proposed heights that staff has come up with are in the ballpark. I do have one small question. I see that in some cases, the heights can reach up to 35 feet, so it begs the question, was that an industrial pole? And okay.
Yeah.
And just the second question would be then, why are we capping at about 32? I mean, it's close enough, but in terms of the proposed industrial district having a 32 feet high pole.
I mean, 35 is kind of rare. I know it happens. Yeah, this was just kind of, the 32 just seemed to be the acceptable
Okay.
average for industrial.
It's in the ballpark.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a few feet, so I would imagine that. I wasn't sure if there's a standard pole. That's why I asked. So with that, I have no more questions or comments. And seeing that there is nobody in the audience to testify, I will I'll move on. So if there's no other further questions or discussion, may I have a motion to close the public hearing?
So move.
A motion made by Commissioner Manny. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Vick. So could I, at this time, request a motion from the Plan Commission, one of the planning commissioners, to make?
I make a motion to recommend that the village board grant proposed text amendments to section VC 9E glare of the zoning ordinance to incorporate additional regulations for limit lighting requirements for multifamily, commercial, and industrial zoning districts as proposed by village staff in the staff report.
Okay, excellent. Do I hear a second?
Second?
Seconded by Commissioner Aitchison, with the motion made by Commissioner Manny. Can I have a roll call?
Vic,
Yes.
Atchison,
Yes.
Manny,
Yes.
Chairman Gray.
Yes. Okay, moving on, to item 3. The third item on the agenda tonight is a workshop to discuss a text amendment regulating masonry requirements for multifamily, commercial, and industrial zoning districts. Staff has requested that the public hearing be continued to the July 18th, 2019 meeting in order to finalize some research and better prepare their recommendations. So at this time, I would like to hear a request of a motion from the planning commissioners to continue the public hearing to July 18th, 2019.
Make the motion that we continue the public hearing on the text amendment to July 18th meeting, 2019.
Excellent. Do I hear a second?
Second.
So motion made by Commissioner Vick and seconded by Commissioner Manny. Could I please have a roll call?
Manny,
Yes.
Atchison,
Yes.
Vic,
Yes.
Chairman Gray.
Yes. Moving on to the good of the order. Staff, do you have anything to present tonight for the good of the order?
Really, I mean, I think I wanted to commend Dan on the Bremen case. He's been working on that for a really long time. I know it was a really lengthy report, but it's a really solid project, and we're really excited. And, you know, South Street underway, now Bremen. I just wanted to publicly thank him again for doing such a good job on that. It was a really good case, so we're excited to see that happen. Let's see, July, we are gearing up and hoping and anticipating we can bring a third project to you all, and that would be the Encore, which is also the former Central Middle School property.
Oh, yeah.
That is also some additional properties with that. We're shooting for July, but we're in the infancy of the incentive agreement discussions, which we've gotten direction on that. So, but we like to keep that moving forward because there's also some relationship with the plaza and how all that timing happens. So that's
Okay.
something that's in the forefront. And then again, we're just gonna be continuing working through some other updates. As we mentioned last couple weeks, we're gonna be doing a comprehensive building code update. You know, every 3 years, the building code goes through an update, and villages can elect to adopt the more recent code. So we're working through that to get to the 2018 International Building Codes, of which one of Dan's projects is also, we're looking at our fee structure in addition to that anticipated update. And we're looking to codify all of our fees throughout the village into one section of the code. So that's why we'll have a mini little public hearing for you guys to
Okay.
take that section out of the zoning code and put it into one central location, so it makes it easier for all fees in the future to be in one spot and can be updated easily. And then in addition to that building code update, we're looking at some things that are currently in the building code to put them into the zoning code. Because we have our own building code in addition to the international code that we
Yeah.
adopt with amendments, we have some unique things in there that are really related to zoning that we think should be appropriately placed in there. And one of those things that I'm working on that I'll be coming back to you guys is that masonry requirement, which is in our building code and needs to be going into our zoning code. Other than that, I think think that's kind of the highlights. Just hoping to get some construction going. The residences, I know is a project you guys might all be aware of, is still on hold, kind of figuring out some engineering things that have come up. So I know that's been a project people have been questioning about, but we are ironing out some of those issues and hopefully getting that project moving forward.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for your comments, Kimberly, and thanks for your diligence, Dan. That was very thorough. At this time, I'll ask if there is any public comment. Seeing there's no public comment, we'll move on, and I will now ask for a motion to close tonight's meeting.
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Manny. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Vick. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Meeting closed.